This is a Film Stories original podcast.
Hi, my name is Scott Bellis. I played Max Fennig on The X-Files, and you're listening to the X-Cast.
Welcome back everyone to the X-Cast. The truth is in here. I am Tony Black, your host as always, and in this episode of the show we are not covering another episode and we're not getting back onto our scheduled Season 3 coverage, not yet. We have a few things around the corner first. In this episode we are talking about the X-Files Cold Cases, the brand new drama, audiobook drama from Audible that is coming out very, very soon, starring David Duchovny, Gillian Anderson as Mulder and Scully, and a host of the main cast from the show, Mitch Pileggi, William B. Davis, etc., etc. Now, we haven't quite got those guys on the show, I'm sorry, but we have probably what is the next best thing. We have the producer of Cold Cases, who has very kindly come on the show, Mr. Dirk Maggs, to discuss the audiobook coming up and talk about the genesis of it and everything like that. And Dirk was a lovely guy to interview, a real gent. The audio hopefully won't show it, but there were some audio problems while we were recording, all on my side, and he was an absolute trooper all the way through. So this was really fun to record, even though he couldn't hear me for most of it. So hopefully you will enjoy hearing more about Cold Cases, which I'm going to urge you all to buy at the end of the show. So without further ado, let's stop listening to me and let's listen to the X-Cast interview with Dirk Maggs about the X-Files Cold Cases. Okay, so guys, I'm here joined by Dirk Maggs, who is the producer and all-round creative guy behind the X-Files Cold Cases, which of course we're talking about today. So thanks a lot, Dirk, for coming on the show. It's really great to have you.
My pleasure, Tony. It's great to be here.
Well, it's obviously you're a very seasoned producer in radio and beyond that. So it's when I saw that your name was attached to Cold Cases, I recognised your name. And I was like, oh wow, okay, this is fantastic. So what brought you into the world of the X-Files then to do this project?
I've actually had a connection with Audible for a while now. We've been talking about doing stuff together based on the fact that my BBC work, which is where I began, has always been an attempt to use the sort of audio techniques of cinema, of movies, to tell stories purely in sound, if you will, audio movies, where we have everything but a camera in the room, but when you listen to it, it sounds like a film. It's got densely layered sound effects, it's got dramatic performances, it's got a very tight script, and there's musical score underneath. So it's kind of the production value driven and good writing, of course, and all the things that make, for good drama of any kind, and really storytelling, because that's what I think of it as being in the end. Movies or audio or books or spoken word, single voice audiobooks, these are all ways of storytelling. So and I had done various things over the years, like Superman, Batman, Spider-Man in the 90s for Radio 1, and then I was doing Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Douglas Adams heard my work and asked if I would bring his last 3 Hitchhiker novels, which were started as books, back to the radio medium, which was a huge thrill. But sadly he wasn't alive to see us do it, but we did do it and it went very well. And Audible, being a really forward-looking corporation and wanting to explore the audiobook medium much more than previously has been the case, asked me in to cover an Alien title, an Alien book called Out of the Shadows by Tim Levin, which is a really good story set between the first 2 Alien movies. And that sort of material really lends itself well to my production style. So I was really happy to do it, and we had a lot of fun doing it. And in fact, we've just done a sequel called River of Pain, also available on Audible, folks. And we actually sort of started off as we meant to go on, high concept, high production values, really riveting listens. If people come, take one of these on a long drive and at the end can't get out of the car because they want to finish listening to it, then, my work is done. But years ago, I did Spider-Man for Radio 1, BBC Radio 1, and we had an American actor playing Spidey called William DeFries, who became a dear friend. And Bill went back to the United States and started various company. Mind's Eye Audio was one, and now he's in one called Pocket Universe Productions. And Bill is just one of the world's great guys. When he walks into a room, he kind of lights it up with 100-watt energy bulb, sort of luminescence. He's just a super guy to have around, and we've stayed in touch over the years. And Bill, said, hey, I've been doing a lot of audiobooks and dramas and so on, and he sends them to me. And then he said, hey, I'm doing the X-Files. And I said, wow, that's fantastic. And he said, no, I'm doing it for Audible, and it sounds like David and Gillian will be coming aboard. And I was just so pleased for him. But then what took me completely by surprise was that Audible and Bill kind of came to me and said, look, would you be prepared to be involved? Would you like to get into this? And I was thrilled to be asked, because I think the X-Files is, superb storytelling, quality work, huge body of work, and of course Gillian and David and all the other actors are so great. And I was thrilled to be involved. And they said, oh, would you be exec producer, which kind of, I wasn't sure what that was. And I said, well, look, if that means I have to sit with a stopwatch and a clipboard, I'm not really, that's not my thing. How about if I adapt it and, sort of generally get involved with polishing it up afterwards? And that was fine by them. So I did the adaptations, Joe Harris's scripts. Joe was fantastic because he allowed me to see his original scripts, which really helped me, because rather like a film script, it's a technical document, and sometimes there's detail in there that is passed to the artist, but the artist may or may not pick up on. But for me, was really, really useful. So, for example, there is one particular story element in the Cold Cases stories that is very germane to the historical X-Files, canonical storytelling, but isn't immediately obvious. And if I hadn't picked up on that from Joe's scripts, I certainly wouldn't have picked up from the graphic novels, because it actually wasn't that clear, deliberately, because it was meant to be a hidden thing. But it helped just plant the seed of where things were going. So I've got, Joe Harris, who's a terrific guy, and Matthew Dow Smith, one of the artists. I'm in touch with these guys, talking to them about the thing. And I'm frantically mugging up on X-Files because it's a long time since I watched it. I didn't kind of keep up towards the end, and I certainly didn't see the recent series 10, which of course these graphic novels were called season 10 when there was no seeming hope of there being one. So I had to do a little bit of, reminding myself of how great a show it was, and, just fantastic characters, and, how the whole thing knits together. And it was kind of like researching a novel for the scripts, to kind of research everything that Joe had written down and remind myself, okay, so the Lone Gunman, where have these guys been, and where did they go, and where might they be now? And the thing about the graphic novel, written as a season 10, was that it basically, the premise of the story is, excuse the emergency services racing past our house. Sorry, must be the Men in Black.
Oh yeah, they're after
black helicopters now. Yeah. The thing about the story is, and this is what I really like about it, we're in a world where Mulder and Scully are living ostensibly as man and wife. They're in a sort of witness protection thing. They're outside the bureau for a bit, which is, kind of not strictly canonical now that the series came back, but on the other hand, one can imagine a period of time where this might have happened, and indeed, was suggested. So, working on that premise, Joe, I think, wanted to bring back classic X-Files with all the characters that everyone loves, many of whom by the end of the series had kind of either been shot dead or disappeared or whatever. And he came up with this. And I'm sure our listeners, many of whom will have read Joe's season 10, but he came up with this brilliant idea for the story, where the cigarette smoking man is back, and Skinner is back. Obviously, he's now a deputy director instead of assistant director. All of this, and of course the gunmen are back, rather epically with a bunker under Arlington Cemetery.
So good,
which is kind of treading on so many American values, but if Joe knows what he's doing, so fine. But it's really fun, because what it does is it really throws us into the X-Files at its sort of optimum point, where all these characters are interacting and so on. And there is a logical reason why these people have seemingly come back from the dead, which is investigated down the line, which becomes apparent. But at this point in time, we're revisiting these cold cases, which is we had to find a subtitle that wasn't season 10 for obvious reasons. So we have really sort of classic stories, and the joy of it, Bill directed the acting sessions and had such fun with the cast, who were just really happy to be back playing these parts. They were enjoying themselves hugely, and in fact, Tom and Dean were really having a lot of fun. The whole gunman thing is like sort of a slightly geekish Marx Brothers act, I suppose, in some ways. There's a kind of comedy element to these guys, and David and Gillian, who have got plenty of other offers of work, were really happy to come in and reprise Mulder and Scully. And in fact, I was supposed to be going to more sessions, but sadly my poor mum died towards the end of last year when we were doing the principal recordings. So I missed out on David. Bill did David in New York City. But I was there for Gillian, who lives in London, and we recorded in London. And although normally I would like to record ensemble and have everybody under one roof, it's just not possible with the actors who have so much going on. I think David, with his doing his music at the moment, is out on and Gillian had just had a rammed diary at the end of last year with all the stuff she's doing. But that said, it was interesting to work with them because they so knew what the other was going to do that when you actually hear the voices together, it just flows like water. It's perfect. And very funny too. There are all those little moments of timing and little bits of back chat that really work so well, and I'm very pleased with the fact that there's a lot of humour in it. There's a lot of that sort of deadpan humour that David and Gillian are so good at, and I was rather because I'm always concerned to keep a sense of the characters having lives. They're not all rabidly stuck on the problem at hand. They're also they might have an itchy leg, or are worried about whether they've remembered to turn the gas off before they left the house. That sort of feeling of real life going on around these amazing characters and what happens to them. So that sort of realism really came through, I felt, and worked very well. And what's great about the X-Files is that because David and Gillian play the characters in such a sort of grounded way, a very professional way, then when the really wild stuff starts happening, you have a sense of them, sort of being professionals in a situation rather than, overexcited 10-year-olds, Lego, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah, definitely, yeah. So what inspired the choice then to adapt the season 10 comics for this project, the Joe Harris graphic novels, of course, as you've mentioned before?
I think the choice of Joe Harris's season 10 as an audio project was very much came from Bill DeFries and my shared experiences adapting comic books for radio back in the 90s when I was doing Superman Lives and Batman Nightfall and stuff like that, where the comic books have a certain style, a certain energy to them that really lends itself to this style of audio production, which we are very keen to push as so much more than just a radio play, if I can put it that way. But that's not being rude about radio plays at all. I make radio plays for the BBC, and I love working for the BBC doing that. But I think what we are doing with material like the season 10 comics, or as I will now call it, Cold Cases, which is our audio title for it, is that there is a unique kind of synergy between comics and audio drama, which has something to do with the fact that we don't overlap. It's like a kind of Venn diagram of two circles where we both don't overlap, and yet we do quite a lot, because although audio and pure audio and drawn pictures don't have anything in common. In fact, if you dramatize the contents of a really well-written comic, and Joe is one of the great writers, into audio, you can make a unique sort of complementary narrative where you don't need the pictures to know what the story is. I mean, you can have the pictures, you can hold the graphic novel in your hand and follow the story. I would say, however, that we fill in a lot of information which perhaps the season 10 comics skip over. I think, Joe assumed his audience would have full knowledge of who, say, the lone gunmen were, or who, say, the relationship between Monica Reyes and John Doggett, which I assumed, and I think probably this is my BBC kind of background, I always assumed that it might be someone who's not so familiar. So there's a little bit more explanation going on in the audio version, and also occasionally some little sidebars of information or some little moments of action which aren't in the comics, which just help set up situations that arise later on. But really, comics as audio was what Bill and I were doing in the 1990s on stuff like Spider-Man and Judge Dredd, where Bill played wonderfully Judge Caligula in The Day the Lord Died, hilariously funny. And so Bill, when Bill got the idea of doing this comics, doing X-Files, comics was where he went to look for material. And fortunately, we've got this fantastic body of work by Joe and the wonderful artists, which we've been able to use. So that's kind of how it started.
So I suppose a big thing on the lips of fans has been the canon issue with Cold Cases. We had Joe Harris on the show, actually, not so long back, and he talked about how it doesn't quite fit in terms of canon. But, I mean, would you say this is an alternate kind of X-Files universe for people to enjoy? Is that the best way to approach Cold Cases as a listener?
Joe was assuming that after before the new season 10 on television was announced, that was it. There would be no more television series of the X-Files. So I think, one has to place this into that gap. And I think the best way to put it is we're looking at a sort of, if season 10, as then it happened on TV, is where the television series went in one direction, in one reality. Joe took the characters and the stories and the whole setup in another direction, in another reality. Although, to be honest, really, it doesn't depart that far from anything. It's all plausible. It just, the timeline becomes a bit muddied because of the fact that the TV show came back. And because, the TV show does its own thing, there seems to be a divergence. However, Chris Carter was involved in the inception of this series, and in fact, contributed to, the opening story, Believers. So it's not as if this doesn't come from the sort of, from Mount Olympus. It does in a sense. But I think in the end, if, and I know some folks get very tied up in knots about canon, and I do think it's actually very canonical, but I think the issue really is you will have to believe. I think you have to accept it on its own terms as being a divergent path, which could have happened after season 9 and the last movie.
So I've got a couple of listener questions then now from a few people. This one's from Carl, and well, it's kind of one in two, I guess. So what would you say the hardest thing is to adapt from the comics to audio, and is there anything that proved impossible to adapt without changing significantly?
There are things you can't do in audio, but actually not that many. In fact, my rule for writing anything for sound is to write it as if you had pictures, because as soon as you start compromising because you feel the medium can't cope with something, you're diminishing what you do, and the medium can cope with anything. And there are some tough things. I remember when we did Spider-Man, we did Spider-Man, the Fantastic Four were in it, and I was wondering how to do the Invisible Girl once she went invisible, because you can imagine that's quite a hard thing to sell in sound only. And then actually we just put a little voice treatment on Lorelei, who played the Invisible Girl, and it just worked fine. You knew that when she was talking like this, she was invisible. So that kind of thing. And actually, there were moments, for example, if we take the story Believers, which is the first of the season 10 stories, the season 10 comic book stories that Joe Harris wrote, there are these characters called the Acolytes who follow this guy called the Deacon. And there is a moment, for example, when they trap Scully in a remote location, and the Deacon causes the sort of the lead 2 or 3 assailants, who are these acolytes, to basically sort of disintegrate, liquefy, the sort of the alien thing that happens. And that was kind of tricky, and sometimes, and one has to think very hard how to avoid, Scully saying, "Good Lord," or whatever she would say, "you are melting before my eyes," because she might say that if she didn't already, if she hadn't over the years encountered that quite a few times anyway, but also it's clunky and so on and so forth. So, yeah, there are moments in the comics when I'm reading it, on the first read, and I'm going, okay, that'll be tricky. But generally, there are ways to do it where we are being faithful to the story. We are doing what is depicted. We are trying to find the least clunky way of selling that visual idea with the dialogue. But ideally, what I try and do is also sell it with the sound effects. And the sound design on these episodes has been, absolutely vital, and we've had 3 really great sound designers on the job: Rory O'Shea, Gary Hayton, and Jamie Mahaffey, and the sound design has been global on this project. It's been from Dubai through Bournemouth to Vancouver in British Columbia. So there's a lot of thought and talent gone into trying to make it as visual as possible in an audio way, and not compromise on what the comics are doing.
Okay, another listener question from this one's from Christian, and he asks, how or what particular elements does this audio adaptation make that makes it distinctively X-Files for anyone who might not have seen the live action series or have read the comic books season 10 series at all?
There is a problem when you adapt anything for an audio medium, although I suppose this is a problem for Joe when he wrote the comics, which is that there will be people who pick it up who may not be familiar with the source material, or who may have only a vague knowledge of the series but be curious enough to want to know more. And then it is really important it's really important that they shouldn't feel excluded from the process. There's nothing worse than feeling somebody's enjoying a party to which you weren't invited, but you ended up at anyway. And the reason, if our stories in audio depart at all from the comic books, if there are scenes in them that aren't in the comic books, or there are much longer scenes in some cases, or whole moments that don't appear in the comic books, it's because I am desperate to be sure that the casual listener who knows that Mulder and Scully are FBI agents working for, the X-Files department, and it sort of involves aliens and things like that, don't start getting in a pickle when references are made to people like the Lone Gunman or to bounty hunters or to, any of these elements, or what is a stiletto, or, Mulder's sister, what happened to her, all of these things. Generally speaking, and this comes back again to the question of, trying to tell the story in an elegant and economical way without over-egging it or being clunky, but that's what we try to do. I've tried to put supplemental information in so that people who know the X-Files well aren't thinking, oh, crikey, for goodness sake, get on with the story, I know all this. And people who don't know the X-Files that well are thinking, oh, I see, so that's why we are in this situation with these guys, or that's what these people are supposed to be doing, or this is how this bit of history comes into place. And of course, in the book, a lot of characters that we really, you have to be a pretty diehard fan to know some of these people come back. So, a brief explanation doesn't do any harm, and occasionally might even remind people who know it well, where this character came from.
All right, for my last question then, Dirk, this one's a classic. It's an old one. Do you believe in the paranormal? Are you Mulder or are you Scully?
Yeah, very good, very good. Do I believe in the paranormal? I think I do, yeah. But I think everything's got a basis in some kind of science. I don't have a problem with the paranormal if it's scientifically based, which I think really, there are moments in the X-Files where you could say it kind of moves into the mystical. But on the whole, there is a scientific basis to it. I do have a problem with magic. Magic I find tricky. Magic is, as Dave Gibbons, the comic book artist, once said to me, and it made me laugh because it's sort of how I look at it. He said, well, you can deal with, you can have AM or FM, and I'm AM. And I said, okay, well, what does that mean? And he said, well, AM is actual mechanics. I'm AM. I like to see how things work. But then there's FM where you don't have to worry about that. And I said, what's FM? He said, fucking magic.
Oh, brilliant. Okay. So before we go then, where can people find you online if they want to know more about Dirk? And do you want to talk to us a little bit about the projects you've got coming up beyond cold cases and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, well, I'm online. There's a dirkmags.com, dirkmaggs.com, which is my website where I talk about what's coming up. And there is stuff coming up, and some of it's quite fun. And I think possibly people who enjoy the X-Files would want to know about it. And also, I tweet. At Dirk Mags, sort of shouting about what's coming up. But no, we've got after the current X-Files stuff, I'm onto a Neil Gaiman book for Radio 4, BBC Radio 4 for Christmas. We've previously done Neverwhere, Good Omens, and Last Christmas, Stardust, Neil's books, and he's a very old mate. And he loves the audio medium and understands how it works, and so that's a really good gig. And we're also getting the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy cast back together one last time for a final shout for its 40th anniversary next March, and we'll be doing a dramatization of Owen Colfer's book And Another Thing, with hopefully some additional material from Douglas that wasn't published. So there's things coming up, and next year looks pretty exciting too. I think there's some more Audible products coming up that would be of great interest to everybody, but it's all under wraps at the moment. But suffice to say, I'm employed, which makes my wife very happy.
Amazing. Sounds brilliant. I suppose a question is, would you go back to the X-Files if you had the chance to?
Oh, if the chance arose, Tony, I think I might be persuaded. It's been fun.
Brilliant. Thanks, Dirk. I mean, it's the Cold Cases audio will be out very soon from Audible. So, check that out, guys. So just a huge thanks from me, Dirk, for coming on the show and giving up your time today.
Thank you, Tony. It's been a real pleasure to chat about it. And I hope anything I said makes sense. I finished mixing this weekend and my brain is still a little bit lost in the worlds of some dark basement in the FBI, but it's been a real pleasure, and I really do hope that folks enjoy listening to them as much as we enjoyed making them.
Thank you very much.
One thing I have to say, Tony, is what a fantastic creative team we've had on this project. I've spoken about William de Vries, who came up with the idea and kind of midwifed it into existence and directed the cast so brilliantly. But also our associate, Fred Greenhalgh, who does a brilliant podcast series called Final Rune, who has a site called The Final Rune, both of whom working out of Maine in North America, in the northern states of America. Both these guys, and their colleagues like Lance Axt, and the fabulous cast they got to do all the supporting roles, really tightly researched. So trying to get Cubans to play Cubans and trying to play Arabic folks to play Arabs and so on and so forth. There's been a huge amount of sort of painstaking background work that if you listen to it, you may not appreciate how much real detail lies beyond the initial the action at the front of everything. There's a great body of work here, and Bill and Fred really deserve a lot of credit and kudos for doing this. They're terrific guys, and they're really at the forefront of bringing audio drama back in the United States, where it's kind of it sort of died back. And in Britain, we've had the tradition of radio drama, but in America, kind of it got lost in the sort of 1950s, early 60s. And these guys are wonderful. They're really bringing it all back. And the other thing as well is just to say how brilliant Audible are to get behind stuff like this and believe in the power of audio as a storytelling medium. And I really hope that if any of our listeners get a chance to listen to this and enjoy it, they'll investigate what else is out there from Audible and other folks working, because it really is a unique medium. And I think at the moment it's going through a bit of a renaissance. So come and catch the wave with us. Try a little bit of what we do.
So there you go. That was Dirk Maggs talking about the X-Files Cold Cases, which is coming out from Audible on the 18th of July. So that's next Tuesday from when you're listening to this. So make sure you get online, you pick that up. Over Audible, there is the Audible app which you can download, and you can be listening to the season 10 comics in audio form. Amazing. I cannot wait to listen to this, and hopefully it's going to be as good as we all think it will be. And by the sound of what Dirk was talking about, we're in for a real treat here. So my thanks once again to Dirk. Do go and check out his website, dirkmags.com. Find out about all the other things he was talking about, the other audiobooks he's involved with, the great audio dramas and all these kind of things. He was a really nice guy to talk to, and I urge you to go and find all his stuff and listen to everything else he's been doing, and then keep track of what he's got coming up. So yeah, we'll be back very soon for more episodes. Our next episodes may actually be talking about Cold Cases, actually, and talking about the audiobook itself once we've listened to it and digested it and things like that, and getting into the nitty-gritty. So we will be doing some episodes, or at least one episode, on Cold Cases, and talking about that in more detail. And then we have a few surprises for you coming up over the rest of this year. We've got one big surprise, which is going to be announced very soon. but it's something that we've been beavering away on at XCast HQ, me and my team of amazing podcasters, and I think you're going to be excited, but I'm not saying any more. So, until we do return for more X-Files related chat, remember the immortal words, guys, as ever. Trust no one. The Xcast is produced and presented by Tony Black, part of the Black Hole Media podcast network. Title music is courtesy of Will A, who you can find on Twitter at I am Will AYE.